some people who lost power, and we have been working on restoration, and we still have a small number of people who are still out. So it means the grid resilience needs to be a little bit better, right? All right, so we want to find out about that today. And to talk about this, we have some experts in the house. We're going to look at it from 3 perspectives: the operational side, the regulatory side, and the environmental side. So I'm going to bring on the rose among the thorns. And I'm going to bring on Sherry-Ann Farquharson from Environmental Solutions Limited. She is the manager of the Sustainable Development Services Division at the Environmental Solutions Limited. Her work focuses on how infrastructure decisions align with environmental realities, climate risks, and sustainable development priorities. She helps us think not just about recovery, but about building smarter systems for the future. Give it up for Ms. Sherry-Ann Farquharson. And joining her will be Ansard Hewitt from the OUR, that's the Office of Utilities Regulation, and he will give us the regulatory perspective. Ansard is the Director General of the Office of Utilities Regulation. His role sits at the intersection of reliability, accountability, and affordability, right? He helps ensure that the system meets required standards while also balancing the very real question of who pays for resilience and how those investments are justified. Let's hear it for Ansard. And then, to join the 2 on stage, we have our very own superstar, Linkoy. Linkoy Small. And Linkoy is the Director of Systems Operations at JPS. He is responsible for the real-time management of Jamaica's electricity grid, including how the system responds under pressure and how restoration is executed after disruptions. He brings direct insight into what it actually takes to keep the system running and to get power back when it gets down. You see him look cool, like him never ever under pressure ever in his life. Him just doing this for a long time. That's why I'm look so used to it. All right, so welcome, gentlemen and ladies. It's a pleasure. I'm so looking forward to this discussion. Are you? Yes? All right. First question, and this is for everybody. You just give me your take on it. The first question. Tell me about your organization's core function, for those who don't know, and how does that role shift during a hurricane? Starting with Sherry.
All right, thank you so much for having Environmental Solutions Limited here. And I just want to share a little bit more what we do. So ESL is a multidisciplinary consultancy firm, and we look at environmental management, sustainable development, but also we pull in the operational and then ensure that from an environmental perspective, we can look at the risks, we can look at how to manage the investments and ensure that we can have business continuity, that communities can remain functional as they should. So when there's a disaster, we switch from the long-term planning to recovery. So we start looking at what are the gaps that you would have had in the system, what are the opportunities for improvement, and so that resilience becomes building better than you had before, and so that you end up with a more resilient system by the time you're finished.
All right. How about you, Ansard?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. The Office of Utilities Regulation is the regulator for utilities, including the electricity sector. And we really have 2 basic roles with regard to the electricity sector. One, we perform what we call economic regulation, which is really about making sure that you pay no more for electricity than should be the cost of it. And the second part is to make sure that there is a minimum quality of service that you get. In relation to disasters, I like to think of our roles in 3 ways. That which we do leading into the possibility of a disaster, that which happens in the recovery stage, and what happens after the recovery stage. Leading into disaster, you want to make sure that the utilities are prepared. And there are a lot of functions that goes into that. And then once the disaster has happened, you want to make sure that they're able to recover as quickly as possible. Because what customers want is that they want electricity. And in our society, they want it now. But depending on what you do going into the disaster will impact how quickly you can recover. And then after disaster, after you've recovered, you must figure out how to prepare for the next one. So you have to do your analysis and prepare for the next one.
Taking into consideration that the next one might actually happen.
Absolutely.
Okay, Lincoln, over to you.
Thanks, Rutlin, and thanks everybody for coming out today, and thank you to the foundation for inviting me.
Thank you.
JPS's role is simply to get the power from our power plants, get them onto these wires, these high tension wires, students, if you know about them, and then get them right down to you in your homes. On an everyday basis, what we try to do is to ensure that our grid operates safely. We want to ensure that everybody goes home safely. That's a normal thing, right? That's a core value for JPS. And then we want to ensure that the grid is reliable. Every time that you flip that power switch, you want to ensure that there's lights on. And then the next thing after that, we want to ensure that the grid is being run as economically viable as possible. We want to keep the rates down. Now, when we go into storm mode, some priorities might shift. The important thing there is to try and get our critical customers on. We go into what is called emergency mode, right? So we try to get power back to our water pumps, telecommunications. A lot of us are on social media. We want to get power back to the hospitals. Persons might be hurt. They need help. As well as to ensure that we get back power to some of our critical infrastructure, to our airports, so that we can start the country back as quickly as possible. So that's what hurricane preparations mean for us, right, when we get ready for a natural disaster.
Thank you so much, Lincoln. And to continue with you on the same vein, how would you assess the resilience of the grid at this time in the context of the changing weather patterns that we're now having?
Okay, that's a very good question, right? So I know I might look like a young man, but I'm in this business for 25 years. And my first hurricane that I witnessed in JPS as a 23-year-old, I'll probably give you my age there, is Hurricane Ivan, right? And the JPS, our network, is built to withstand a Category 3 hurricane. That's what we do. And over the years, we have had put in significant infrastructure development in trying to get our grid moving from Category 3 to Category 4 to 5. So, yes, it's not ideal for Category 5, and guess what? Melissa was in no way ideal. It was a superstorm. So, we are good now in managing Category 3, thanks to help from our partners at the OUR and the government framework. We're building to ensure that we can be as resilient as possible. However, we're not there as yet. But that's why we are here today, to continue to evolve, to get our grid ready to withstand anything that will come our way. So we're not there yet, but we're getting there. Category 3, 4, and 5, that's JPS, because at JPS, we never stop till we power what matters.
Thank you. Did you say anything? Anything that comes?
Listen,
anything?
The sky is the limit.
Okay.
Innovation and affordability is the key. So yes, we would want to do anything, but as long as we can continue to partner together and do what we can afford to do, because we all know we don't have infinite resources, right? We don't have all the money in the world. But as we grow as a country, we will put things in place to ensure that we can satisfy for any disaster.
Thank you so much. All right, this question for Sherry, I'm also going to throw it to answer. What does grid resilience mean to your organization, and what are the critical building blocks behind that concept?
So to join Lincoln in aging myself, I remember post-Hurricane Gilbert that my community in St. James got back electricity at the end of January. So it would have hit in September, and I got back electricity at the end of January. That's 1987. And so you recognize the difference that has been made in terms of the hardening of the infrastructure, the changing in the codes and the regulations that has allowed us not only to be able to keep the lights on during the storm for some of the persons here who had their hands up earlier, but also to ensure that you're able to repower faster for those persons who would have lost electricity. And so you're looking at resilience, meaning not just not losing power, but how quickly can you get persons back online. And so the strengthening of the grid, and there are persons who have spoken about undergrounding some of the infrastructure, but that now has to be balanced with the cost of doing that, and where does that actually make sense from a maintenance and cost perspective. And then treating the backup power as an infrastructure in itself that needs to be managed. So a lot of persons talk about ensuring that you have backup power for critical infrastructure, but then you saw, for instance, in the water sector, of the about 750 water pumps that were assessed in the most hard-hit areas, only 182 of those that had backup power remained online. And when you look at St. James, for instance, of the 84 water pumping stations, only one remained online after the storm. And these systems, they had either diesel generators or solar PV. So now you need to look at resilience in terms of what are the standards for these systems, what are the maintenance schedules, ensuring that they actually have fuel, so that if there is a challenge with the primary grid, that those backup systems will actually function as we intend. And so resilience has all of these pieces that need to come together to ensure that we can restore safely, quickly, and that those systems that need to remain online as far as possible, the standards are there so they actually can remain online.
Thank you so much. I love the perspective, from the environmental side. You're looking at it wholesomely, yes. Yeah?
Right.
And sir, from the regulatory side, what does grid resilience mean to you?
Thank you. And I'm going to borrow from an analogy that my colleague, Dr. Cedric Wilson, gave last week at another forum, where he said that he thinks about resilience in terms of a boxer. And the first part of resilience is your ability to take a punch without going down. And that's what it is, a question of how well the system stands up to the storms that come, right? But there is also the question of, if you do get knocked down, how quickly can you get up back? How quickly can you get back your legs under you? How quickly can you dance around and be ready to shake off the effect of it? And then the third part of it, he said, was that it is also the ability to recalibrate, how quickly you can recalibrate. Because it means that when you get knocked down, you have to reconfigure your strategy. You have to say, okay, what are the weaknesses that have caused me to go down? And then I have to make preparations. So I like that analogy because I think that it is essentially what we need to do. We need to make sure, as far as is possible, that in the case of the electricity system, that it can take the punches that are going to come, and they are inevitable. And we might get to this later on, but there is a trade-off between how prepared you are and how costly it is. Because you have to, if you're going to equip your fighter, you have to expose him to the best trainers, have the proper weights, all of those things. So there is a trade-off. And then how quickly you get up as well is also related to cost, and we're concerned about that. And the recalibration is a similar thing.
Thank you so much. Linkoy, I know you kind of touched on it in your earlier presentation, but do you just want to be a little bit more specific so that the audience will remember? What does grid resilience mean for JPS?
What grid resilience means to JPS is it's a measure of how quickly can we, to answer his point, take a punch, right? But is able to stay up as best as possible. It's how best we keep the lights on. Let me give you an example. I was there for Hurricane Ivan, for Dean, Category 4, Category 5 storms. In those years, our grid was shut down by these storms, right? One of the things that JPS is actually doing right now with the level of investments that we have made over each year is that we have improved the resilience, the strength, the response of our grid. So, back in those times, Category 3, Category 4 hurricanes, our grid will be shut down, there'll be no power. One of the things that we have been able to do by the level of investment to show you how quickly we respond is that in grid resilience, your task first is how quickly can you get that punch and get back up. But then it is dependent on the things you put in place, infrastructure. We have invested in infrastructure, proactive maintenance programs. And then after you have done that, when you're getting ready to respond to the storms, how quickly do you respond? One of the things I can quickly tell you, Rutlin, is that over the years, if you were to trend every hurricane from Ivan coming all the way up to Sandy, our response times have greatly improved. So it shows you the speed of the response. And then what we did in Melissa and Beryl is that for storms of those nature, the grid would actually be shut down. For the first time in Beryl and in Melissa, we were able to hold up 23% of our grid in a superstorm. This shows the infrastructure and the investment that we have put in. This shows how resilient our grid has become. But there is work to do. So for us here at JPS, it is, yes, to answer the part, we take the punch. But with each punch, we'll be able to fight back and to stand up. And that is one of the things that grid resilience means for us, is to take the punches, but not to flinch, never to go down, and to keep fighting. And with every year that passes, we will continue to improve, and that helps us also improve the speed of response. For Melissa, 80% of our customers were restored within 1 month. Some people came to the island and never even realized that there was a hurricane. And after 5 months, we got back 99%. That is true speed, and it's a testimony of the Jamaican people and JPS.
Thank you. I'm tempted to ask for a round of applause, but maybe you're all going to say I'm biased because I work there. But I think it's excellent performance, actually. All right, grid resilience. This one is for you, Cherie. What key vulnerabilities did Hurricane Melissa expose, particularly in relation to backup power systems?
Yeah, so I mentioned a little of it in the previous response. But one of the key vulnerabilities that we recognized is there are persons who treat having a backup system as resilience in and of itself. But we recognize that the backup systems, they need to be properly designed and properly maintained, or else they will fail before or with the primary grid. So for instance, with those who had solar PV systems as backup, there's a report that was done by RMI called Solar on the Storm, and they would have assessed systems coming out of Hurricane Beryl. And one of the key things they found is that a lot of those systems failed because of the racking, because of how they would have been connected, how the panels were connected to the racks, how the panels were oriented. A lot of the failures are simple things that could have been done differently in the design phase. And so one of the key vulnerabilities we found across Jamaica as well is that having a backup system does not make you resilient unless that backup system, like the primary system, can take the punches and can keep standing.
And a follow-on question to that, is there anything that the Environmental Foundation of Jamaica is planning to do in that regard? Education, maybe public education, anything?
All right, so I won't speak to EFJ specifically, but Environmental Solutions Limited, we just completed for the Planning Institute of Jamaica a national recovery framework, as well as parish recovery plans for the most affected parishes. And all of these recommendations are there with the PIOJ. They would have been shared, and we would have had consultations across sectors, the energy, health, with the business community, with the persons on the ground. to get all of the experiences of the persons who lived through the storm. And we have now shared these recommendations with PIOJ. And so the next step is that public education. So whether it is persons who are here who can share the lessons or through the official publication channels to get the word out. Also with, in terms of regulation of those smaller solar PV systems that are being installed to ensure that the standards that are required to withstand the storms that we are seeing that are becoming our new normal. And actually, there is a discussion in the next World Meteorological Organization meeting coming up as to whether or not Melissa needs to be categorized as Cat 6 because superstorm doesn't quite cover it. Right. And so if this is going to be our new reality, we have to get the word out that we can't continue to do what we've always done.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Answer, this one is for you. How does the regulatory framework support grid resilience, and what are the cost implications of that?
Right. So the regulatory framework should support grid resilience in terms of the standards that you require in order to be able to have a system that is sustainable and resilient. But then the framework must also allow you to provide the kind of financing that allows for that to take place, that manages, that creates the environment for that to happen, but also ensure that it takes place in such a way that it costs no more to the ratepayers than it needs to. But you have to accept, as part of the regulatory framework, that there is a cost to resilience. And, you know, I'm making the point because the job that you do as a regulator is that everyone expects that you are going to essentially keep rates low. And a regulator may become popular if it is able to secure very low rates, but if those rates are artificial, we have a problem, because the minute you lose electricity and can't get electricity for months, then your regulator is enemy number one. Well, perhaps number two. The grid operator will be enemy number one. But my point is that we have to strike this balance and make sure that there is resilience built into the grid, that it is done at an economic cost, and that the environment is such that it will happen over time, so that more and more you find a system that can stand up to the challenges that will come.
Thank you for that response. Linkoy, it's your turn. Share with us some of the specific measures that the company, that JPS, is taking to strengthen the grid against the severe weather that we're now experiencing.
Okay. So one of the things that we have done to strengthen the resilience of our grid is that, as I said before, we were built with the standards to embrace for a Category 3 hurricane. However, in realizing that with climate change, there are more storms, more intense storms, we have started to harden or to redesign our transmission network to ensure that our transmission network is robust. For someone who might be wondering, the transmission network is what you call those big high-tension wires, right? So we are ensuring that those wires, those structures can withstand wind speeds in excess of Category 3, in excess of Category 4, and we are doing that in a phased basis. The next thing that we have started to do, and we even started it from last year, is that we have now improved the foundation around some of our poles. There's something that's called polecrete. So a pole is in the ground, rain falls, the ground gets soggy with the wind speed. All that happens is that the wind blows over the pole, right? Because the ground is soft, it's too moist. What if you put a kind of material in the ground where the foundation is, that it absorbs some of that moisture and it keeps the pole standing? We have invested in using some of those mechanisms to ensure that we ensure the poles are as firm as possible. Then the next thing, you guys are all scientists. I've seen some bright young minds here. If I'm here and you're there, and there's a wire between us, and the breeze can pass between, the more wire that is between us, there's a chance that the breeze can blow the wire and pull us both down, correct? See, you're looking at me, bright young mind. What happens, though, if we come a little bit closer together? The impact of the wind between those wires will basically prevent me and you from being blown down if we make that space a little bit smaller. So what we did for Melissa is that we are not just rebuilding, we're redesigning. So we have redesigned our grid to make some of those, they call them pole spans, smaller, so that the wind impact is less detrimental. And then we have done a lot of investment in communication infrastructure. In order to manage the grid, you have to basically be in touch with what is out there. We use specialized control systems in the control center that I manage so that we can see what is going on in the power plants and on the lines and on the equipment. And in order to ensure that we have that visibility throughout the storm, JPS has made millions of dollars of investment to improve that communication infrastructure. So that, including vegetation management, you might see our people going down and removing trees on the wires. These are some things that we have done to ensure that the resilience of our grid is improving, and we will continue to work, as Ansford allows us with financial affordability, to ensure that the grid gets even more resilient.
Thank you. That was exciting news a while ago. Some of those things you just shared, I'm feeling like if there's a media person in here, we're going to get a headline tomorrow. Some of those things that are being put in place for resilience. Excellent work there, Linkoy. For all of you, just give me your thoughts on who do you consider to be the critical partners in this process of building grid resilience, and what are the key improvements that are being prioritized post-Melissa? Who are the key partners in grid resilience? Who do you...
If you want me to go first, Rutlin.
Yeah.
The key partners in grid resilience is everyone in this room, our customers, you, the students, the average Jamaican. Everything that we do is to ensure that we give you the best service that you deserve. In order to do that, though, it requires policy framework. It involves us working along with our regulator, with working with the government, working with our external partners. We are all in this together. So the critical things that we need to do with our stakeholders is how we communicate. We have to have alignment. We have to listen to you, our customers, to find out what it is that you require. Yes, we can't give you everything you deserve. We can't turn the lights back on as soon as the hurricane goes. But in working with the partners, it is important that we develop a framework so that that framework now will give everybody a plan as to how do we rebuild. Everybody's aligned on it. Everybody knows what their responsibilities are when it comes on to restoring the grid. So it is that communication channel and that alignment between the utilities, government partners, or regulators, but very much more importantly, you, our customers. That is what we use.
Thank you. Answered.
Well, I suspect that in a way, Linkoy has answered for all of us, because he has said that all of us have a responsibility or have a role in that. And therefore, yes, the grid operator, the regulator, those who set policies, government, financial institutions, the capital markets, etc. And therefore, I'd like to, so all stakeholders have a critical role in this. I'd like to think a little more about some of the functions that he mentioned. The matter of communication. We have found that that is absolutely critical. Communication before the event happens as to what you're doing, what you're likely to do, what are you preparing for, etc. And I think we've learned some lessons from Beryl that came into Melissa, and we did a lot of that. Then there is a matter of coordinating, getting all the critical stakeholders together. And if I say it, when Hugh came to Jamaica, we had a discussion, and he told me that he was trying to speak to different heads of utilities. And I said to him, well, that's absolutely critical, And I suggested to him that he engage with the NWC as well because there were some concerns. And there was a masterful coordination, and he led from the front in that regard in terms of getting all the utilities together. You know, and I certainly commend that effort, and it's something that, as a regulator, we encourage. And also, we have made ourselves available to say, if there is any issue or roadblock, we're going to try to clear those, because those things are important. And then the issue of just communicating with the public. Part of the difficulty we had in Beryl is that the public, there were some gaps in the communication. I think the communication in Melissa has been managed much better. It has been managed better by us, the OUR, I think. I hope you agree. I think the JPS has done a very good job of doing that as well, and the government itself. So, you know, I think those are critical things, functions that the stakeholders need to carry out. One other thing I'd say, the matter of financing. Again, one of the things you need to do immediately after disaster is to have liquidity. Now, you may have a lot of arrangements for loans and capital, but you need to mobilize funds as quickly as you can. And therefore, we need to work with the financial institutions, the funders of the capital markets, whatever it is, to make sure that arrangements are in place pre-disaster that you can tap into immediately. Because you cannot wait 3 months to negotiate a loan. Because while that is happening, the country is burning. Because people want back their electricity, and they want back their water, and they want back their telecommunications facilities. So we need to pay closer attention to what are the financial arrangements that are in place to enable you to get a hold of liquidity immediately after disaster so that you can start the work immediately and sustain it.
Thank you for the excellent points made. Yes, Sherry?
So that I don't just say ditto to what my other colleagues have said, to the point of the impact on all of us and the role that each of us has to play. When we don't have a resilient infrastructure, you see the cascading impact, because the energy sector really is the backbone that keeps all other sectors going. So after Melissa, you would have seen persons who would not have access to cash because the ABMs were down. Persons were not able to get fuel. Businesses were not able to operate. And even those businesses that could operate, if they did not have this system to take cashless payments, their customers could not engage with them. And then you saw with the loss of the clean water, leptospirosis outbreaks that happened. And so when you recognize the cascading impact, each person has a role to play to ensure that whatever you can do from a community level, so whatever you see in your community that is not as it should be, to ensure that those things are reported so that those who need to know are able to respond. And the business community has a role, not just for the resilience of their own businesses, because that is a part of it, to ensure that businesses can continue, but also that you're working together with the utility, with the regulator, with the policymakers and the planners, so that we can all come together. Because if we don't, we all feel the impact of the vulnerability that's created.
Thank you. Now, I suspect that based on what answer just said answered a while ago, I think he kind of implied, but I'm curious to hear from you, Linkoy. What were the most critical lessons that JPS learned from Hurricane Melissa?
One of the lessons that we learned, critical lessons, is mobilization of resources. We learned it from Beryl, and we actually implemented a lot of it from Melissa. You have to have the people here ready to work. We do not have all the resources in Jamaica. We do not have all the linemen in Jamaica in order to restore the system. So one of the things that we did, and I remember, is that 3-4 days before the hurricane, we actually brought in at least 70 line workers in to get us ready, to help them to understand, if you want to call it, the lay of the land. Then, in doing that, we needed additional support. And that is one of the collaborative efforts I was speaking about earlier in terms of we got help from the region, from Carlick, as well as from some entities in North America to help us to rebuild. In getting these additional persons in, where to put them, the timing to put them, the prioritization, these are some things that are critical. To have the necessary inventory that is there, because you can have all the guys to work, but if you don't have the equipment and infrastructure that they need to implement, then that's a problem. So to stage things, to have your stock levels there before, to answer a point, the financing, because a hurricane, right, to the resilience factor is very expensive. For JPS, just to restore this grid, it cost over $350 million. That's not cheap. But we learned a lot from Beryl, and we implemented some solutions to ensure that not only the human resources, but as well as all the material that is required, we put those things in place very early. And that is why we were able now, to the speed of resilience, to get things back work up and running as quickly as possible. And for us, that big takeaway is something now that we would have to sit down with the multilaterals, the regulator, to ensure that that framework is in place, the affordability, the financing, because yes, it does take cash to care. It's not something cheap and easy. But as we work together from a policy perspective, as well as to ensure that the financing is there, then we'll even get quicker at how we will restore the grid.
Thank you so much. Final question for a response from each of you. What actions should stakeholders, including students and educators, take now to support a more resilient energy future?
All right, so I'll start with that one. So one of the first things that as looking at it, and energy resilience and electricity is already in the curriculum. And so one of the key things is to ensure that this is taught from a practical perspective. So if you have from the small children all the way up doing energy audits of their homes, so looking at what kind of electricity, what type of bulbs they're using, how much energy they're using, and so that they start getting sensitized and recognize that one of the first things they can do is to use less energy. So looking at energy efficiency, but also giving them the projects, because we've seen the innovation that they can come up with. So allowing the innovation, allowing them to use the AI tools to dream as big as they can, and so that they start feeding into the system. Another one of the things that is really key that came out as we were doing the consultations is to recognize oftentimes persons in the community, they know the experience of what's on the ground and what will work for them. And I'll use an example from the community where I grew up in, where there's a section of the community that would usually flood. And it had some really small drains, and when the persons from the water agency came, we told them, listen, you need to take out all of these drains and just build a bridge. They made the drains bigger, and of course, the flooding happened again. And it wasn't until the third time that they actually came and listened to persons in the community say, hey, without a bridge, you're going to have blockage of this drain. So recognizing that in your community, there are things that you will see, there are experiences you would have had that you need to share. So you need to speak up, whether you're gonna do it on TikTok or you're gonna go to the consultations when they're happening, but make your voice heard and advocate for your community. So ensure that the lessons that you have learned, the things you experience, is communicated to those who are doing the policies, who are doing the regulations, and who are hardening the grid.
Thank you so much. I'll work my way across.
Wow. So, I was here thinking that, and my colleague has just said it, that I am heartened to see so many students, so many young people in this room taking an interest in this subject, because I think that's part of what we do to build resilience. Awareness of your situation, awareness of your vulnerabilities, and to recognize that you have agency to change those vulnerabilities. And therefore, the exhortation is along the same lines to say to you, think about what you can do in your own individual situation, in your homes, in your communities, in your schools, to contribute to this issue of resilience. You have the genius, you have the ideas to contribute to make the country more resilient. I was thinking as well that one of the things I've been thinking about is the extent to which, you know, we have networks, and the economics of it is that it's good to have networks and systems that are really joined and work together. But in a part of what you do when you have a disaster is the ability, if you can, to have some amount of separation, to have, you know, areas of the system that are not necessarily damaged, if they can function independently. So I think we need to figure ways of, and you know, the engineers will tell us how this can be done, no doubt. And I think that has been manifested in post-Melissa, where we have microgrids being installed in Darliston and in Betheltown, and one was in Treasure Beach as well. So that, you know, we need to build that kind of variety, I suppose, or into the system that allows you to continue some of your operations even while you make the system whole.
As I look at my chairman and my CEO, one of the things that they've always done is to challenge me to do what I'm going to tell all you young people here. Think big and dream big. Never limit yourself. In 2004, for Hurricane Ivan, I just started to work in the control center. And prior to that, I used to play around with power system simulators. I played around it. I'm a nerd. Nerds are cool. Don't worry about that, right? Nerds are the ones who make it big. I played around with simulators, not realizing that I was helping my then director as to how to build resilience into the grid, how to manage the grid during storms and disasters. And after playing around with those models, I realized that I learned something. I challenged myself to say that let me do something more than what the design was, how things were set up to do. And in that, I made his plan at that time in 2004. I improved it. Because that's what we do here as humans. We all seek to get better. One day, one of you will be sitting in my seat. One day, one of you will be sitting in my CEO seat, right? One day, you'll be in my board chairman, Damian's seat. And what JPS is doing to help that is something like this with the foundation. We are also helping with our internship program. I'm looking over there and I'm seeing some of my young interns. So now you're in high school and you're going to go to university. There's a way out for you. I'm ready to welcome you into our internship program through something that our foundation and the company is actually sponsoring. Because in order for this country to get better, we have to invest in you. Young people, you are the future. Don't let anybody limit you. So for JPS, our answer to that is training and development. Investment in the human capital that is you, your young minds. Never limit yourself, and in that, Jamaica will have an improved and a more resilient future. And that's what JPS is doing to ensure that we're ready for the future.
Thank you. Well said. All right. I'm about to wrap up, but I just want to find out if there's anybody in the audience, just one question that is burning, and you don't want to miss that opportunity to ask that question today. Is there anyone? I see a hand around there. Just come up and I'll let you use my microphone. Should I come down and meet you?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I would love to know from JPS and OUR, when will this event stop? the persons who are paying their bills are being charged for those who are not legally attached. When will we get freedom, please? Thank you.
I guess you could put that in the context of grid resilience too, right?
Hold on there. Don't let her go. Come back. Sit down. Come here.
You want her to come right
You
here?
want to come right here, man. I can stand up beside her.
You're going to...
Come right here beside her. Come here, man. You see that question I asked? That's a very good question, you know.
Yes, sir. I know that.
And one of the things that we are doing and we are working together is that those persons who are, we say, some people stealing your light and everything, and we're not, no, we're not into that. We are all in this thing together, you know. So when you see somebody who's throwing up something, you just tell us. It is our responsibility to ensure that as soon as you identify anybody who's stealing electricity, right, that we take them down. You see, everybody, we need help in order to do this. We can't see everything. We don't have that overall visibility. But I can tell you, rest assured, that we're putting in the different infrastructure in place to control it. And we are not into the business of charging people for power, right? For based on what some people do. So let us continue to work together. You see that guy, the regulator? He's also helping us to put the necessary mechanisms in place. So when this finished, me and you will talk some more, some of the things that we're doing. But Jamaica, hold on, let me think there. But Jamaicans, we are working very hard to control electricity theft. It is something that is not right, but we need you in the partnership to get that under control. And then as soon as I finish, I am coming right here on the back to tell you everything else that we're doing about that.
Thank you.
I'm very glad because I have done something and it ricocheted. So I would love to speak with you off camera.
Thank you very much, Mom.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your question. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to give a round of applause to our panelists. Dr. Sherry Farquharson, Ansard Hewitt, Lincoln Small. It is clear from the discussion that grid resilience is not a one-man show. It's not a one-organization activity. It's all of us collaborating, coordinating, and moving towards that point where we can actually not only take the punch, but recover quickly from the punch. Thank you so much for being here. I hope we all learned something today, and I look forward to when we can say grid resilience is able to take anything. Thank you so much. All right, over to you, Mr. DJ.
Dummy on the beat, so it's a banger.